Aloha koa pau. This is Kaiopua Fife again with the Kiwani Foundation, bringing you another segment of Voices of Truth, one-on-one with Hawaii's future. And you'll see from where we are that we're at a different elevation than we normally get to shoot from. And we have with us today Tamar deFries, who is going to explain why we're up at this location and what we're looking at. Tamar, mahalo for being with us.
Aloha.
Thank you so much for being here.
Aloha.
I know that this is your main reason for being and your focus right now. And so with the limited time that we have, I'd like to just have you let us know why we're here, what you're all about as far as this project, and why we're here.
Mahalo and aloha for having me here. Thank you so much.
Sure.
The reason why I brought you to this elevation, and I think it's very important, is currently there's a legislation. It's actually within both of the committees of the Congressional Senate and Congressional House. And it's about the National Heritage Area. And about 6 to 7 years ago, a group of individuals, self-interested individuals, got together to form what is this boundary called the National Heritage Area that will then come under the National Parks of Service. So a lot of people say, okay, what is this? What does this mean? But I think it's good to start off what the area looks like, what we're really talking about, the mass of land, the mass of people, businesses that this will impact in a negative way. First of all, the boundary is the whole ahupua'a of Honolulu is what they're referring to it. So essentially, if you were to take a line from Manoa Road and go straight down this direction, and then all the way out past the reef, because they're talking the ahupua'a. So you're talking about submerged lands.
Right.
All the way across this area to where if you take Like and follow Like all the way down, and then all the way to the mountaintop.
To the ridge up on
to
top?
To the ridge of the top. And actually, it's a boundary. And in a 2009 congressional testimony, they talked about boundaries and jurisdiction. It would become the jurisdiction of the National Parks and Service. Under this group of people who are saying that they want to promote partnership and diversity, but what they're really doing is, it's a cottage industry to bring in fine economic development, but tourism development, but a master plan of management of the area. So what this group does, and it's called the Hawaii Capital Cultural Coalition, is they have a unaccountable, unelected board that develops a management plan for all of this area, for all the different communities.
In isolation?
Yes, in isolation. And they then submit it to the Secretary of Interior. So here we are, our Hawaiian voice, our local voice, being sent to Washington, D.C., given up to Washington, D.C., because it's not our voice, right? It's the HCC's voice being sent up to Washington, D.C., with the Secretary of Interior given the right to approve or disapprove the management plan. If they disapprove the management plan, they give in their recommendations of how it should be implemented. So for example, in Wheeling, another National Heritage Area, their isolated, self-interested group wanted it all to be Victorian theme. So everybody in the area had to take on this theme. It was going to be a $160 million project in which they would have to pay for. No community input, no community voice. And this is what concerns me, is because there's diverse communities in this ahupua'a. Right over here behind us, we have the area of Papakolea, the oldest homesteads. And then above that, we have an area, Tantalus. And now Tantalus wanted to be withdrawn. They asked to be withdrawn. But the HCC says, you can't withdraw. They ignore it. They say, we need all of this land to tell our story. Well, they need it all because they want control to develop this management plan. Then, of course, you have different situations in Kaka'ako. So all these communities have different issues, different concerns. Yes, we share the same, but they want to then come in and create a management plan that we all have to live by. And so
without any input.
Without any input. And this is concerning to me, just not as a resident, but also as a Hawaiian, as someone who cares about our local community. Why would we give up our local voice, send it thousands and thousands of miles away to Washington, D.C., for them to determine how we should manage the way we live, to manage the aesthetics of our area, just basically say you are now within this designation under the National Parks and Service. A handful of people on this unelected, unaccounted board will determine how you're supposed to keep your yard, determine what color your house needs to be painted, determine the zoning issues, the condemnation, what lands will become public. The biggest issue for me here is we're still in a reconciliation process. Okay, one of the areas that falls in this designation area is Mauna Ala. Mauna Ala, it to me represents the true and sovereign place that we have left. It will be the first time in our history in which the Secretary of Interior will make a management plan for Mauna Ala.
Or accept the management
Or accept
plan.
it. And so that's what concerns me. And this is why
Well,
I wanted
I'm
to
wondering,
see everybody.
yeah, when we're talking about how does that affect the ownership of property? I mean, who owns the property at that time, or even if we have the people who still hold title, if they have mandates from outside as to what they can do with it, is it really private property? Is it Department of Hawaiian Homelands in Papakolea? It's the entity.
Exactly. And this is one of the biggest concerns in all national heritage areas is private property ownership. And one thing that it does is, well, one, I have to first say this. The program nationally, okay, through the National Parks and Services, has a rough estimate budget of somewhere between $15 and $18 million for all
The whole thing?
For all the programs. So we're talking 30 plus national heritage areas plus the new ones that they accept.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the money's going to be private money from the developers.
Yes.
Because
Okay.
there's obviously
there is
not
no
enough.
money to implement the management plan.
Right.
Testimony within Congress is saying that national heritage areas receive anywhere between $350,000 and $150,000 a year to operate the management plan. So definitely monies will have to come in from developers, monies will have to come in from people who have self-interest in that area. What is really frightening to me right now is they're making false promises and false hopes. We're in a dire economic...
Such as?
Well, they promised millions and millions of dollars to Papakolea to support our new regional plan that we've worked out with Department of Hawaiian Homelands. Millions and millions of dollars. Upward to $20 million.
$20 million just for participating in support,
Yes.
a supporting way?
Yes, so they're promising...
Not project related, but
no,
kind
they're
of like
just promising. You support us, we get this designation, and they are dropping names, and I don't like to drop names, but they're dropping key senator names, they're dropping key player names, and promising things that the program, in a nutshell, cannot support because there's no money in it. Obama has actually asked for a 50% reduction in the budget, and Congress has requested to eliminate the project. So they're at a time when we are economically suffering, you're giving false and empty promises because actually in Congress, on the floor, they talked about national heritage areas becoming cottage industries for very specific people who get their pockets fat while the residents suffer, particularly private owners. Because what happens is they develop a management plan. And then within those boundaries, they say, the Secretary of the Interior, we expect the state and the city and county to make this a blueprint of how you are going to operate this community land-wise. So they can recommend that we want a park in a certain area. But that park may be someone's private property. So then they say, okay, you can use one federal dollar and match it. So those matching dollars that come in from developers, private, other people that are self-interested, to match that dollar. And they use that money to then purchase, and then they work with the city and county because they've possibly adopted it as their management plan. So then it's already in their plan to condemn that. They change zoning laws. And this is happening in several, particularly there's a heritage area that is the Gettysburg and Wheeling, and it is amazing because they are condemning along the way and using the match of federal dollars. And there are actual national heritage areas that the federal government has allowed to use them federal money to purchase property. So
outside the original
outside,
heritage
yes,
budget.
yes,
Yeah, clearly, I mean, even if you're matching dollar for dollar and you've got a small budget to begin with, you're limited to be there. So it goes back to the outside money that's got to
yeah.
come in.
Or
Or the proceeds from some kind of use of the properties.
what is really now what they say about this, it's resident driven. That's what they say. There's 4 critical steps prior to legislation being proposed. 3 of them primarily ask for residential involvement and input. They've been doing this 6 to 7 years. We as residents found out, well, I at least found out about 15 months ago.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they come out to us first and say, here is a program, are you interested in it? Now, what was really interesting in Arizona was there were 22 communities in this area that they designated. Now, let's talk about the intent of the program. So some of the communities said, well, I don't necessarily want to be lumped in with all these communities.
Right.
I just want it in our community. But the proponents, the advocates, such as like this HCC proponents, are doing what they did to Tantalus. No. We need the whole Ahupua'a to tell the story. But why? If it's such a great program, per your statements, then why wouldn't you let another community go off and do it on their own? Why are you forcing them to be part of your group?
Clearly, it's control.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
You know, you don't want to invite too many people to come in and participate if they don't endorse exactly what your agenda is, right? So, well, this is a huge thing. I mean, I'm thinking about, we've got private property, and then we have Hawaiian homelands, and I think we have people up there who would be impacted because whatever should come down through this plan or subsequent to it as it evolves, I mean, they essentially have no input then.
Yes, no input. They say they're promising input. They're promising a variety of things, but they don't, in a nutshell, they're unaccountable, unelected. They can promise all they want, like they're promising the money, but the question is they can't deliver because the money's not there. And they don't really have to listen to us because they're not elected officials. So they're just giving these false promises because they want people to support it. And in reality, if you look at the history of the National Heritage Area and the flaws in other areas, we should be learning to say, this is not what we want to do. We don't want a boundary around us.
Yeah, it sounds to me like the Secretary of the Interior or whoever is going to be making the judgment on this kind of a plan would ideally be looking for free and prior informed consent, participation by the community, but not always the case, clearly.
They did it for 6 years without having to come talk to us, and it was a few of us residents in this area who just asked questions. The first meeting was at Kamakuku Kalani, where the leadership there that asked for this meeting said, how long have you been discussing this? And you're starting off this program on the foundation of our mo'olelo, our ancestors, and you didn't even come talk to us?
Yeah. Well, we're essentially talking about a development operation. So I think we've got a pretty good feel for the immensity of this, this huge area. Why don't we jump in the car and we'll go over to the other side and look up Mauka so people can get kind of a full view, as full as we can give them. We are going to realize where we're looking at here also, that we've come around the corner and now we're looking out in this direction, looking towards Diamond Head in the back.
Yes. So the idea of a National Heritage Area is to put interpretive centers and wayfinding signs. Well, then why do you need an unelected, unaccountable group to be formed that receives all this money to do a management plan and send that management plan up for approval to the Secretary of Interior? Why can't it just be grant money from the federal government to just do a sign? Why do you have to create a boundary to do just to put a wayfinding sign?
And why, in the very beginning, if this is such a worthy project, isn't the community that's being impacted participating?
Now, what they're talking about doing is, this is the area of the regional plan for Department of Hawaiian Homelands. And what they're looking at is to put a kupuna center and also a kauhale, a cultural center here. And part of what a lot of people are rumbling about is, well, what about a visitor center? Well, to me, as a community resident, I start wondering, okay, our community never voted for a visitor center. we voted for something that would support our kupuna
Sure.
and our children.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, they're talking visitor center, they're talking parking lots for buses, and they're putting it into the saying, oh, well, we'll put your regional plan into our management plan. Why? Department of Homelands has it in the regional plan. Why should we be a part of that management plan? Because we've already decided what's to happen here. You know, they're talking about putting interpretive signs and wayfinding things, and I'm like, why? We have so much traffic already. Our babies are here playing in these neighborhoods, and now you want to bring more and more up to what? The detriment, in my opinion, is us who live here. This is our backyards. And one thing that they've said about national heritage areas is that, okay, people come up, but all of a sudden people start wandering. They end up in people's backyards, they end up parking in front of their houses, you know, and then why is all of a sudden this, with no residential input, are you talking about
You know what it sounds like to me?
plan?
It sounds like to me a zoo, like where people come to a zoo and look.
That's how I feel. Like we're like a bubble,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
everybody look at the Hawaiians,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm hurt by that, but they're doing that to all of our community, Hawaiian or not. And that's what really concerns me. And again, they did it without any residential input before the legislation was actually introduced to Congress. And that's what bothers me the most. Now they're trying to make false promises like, well, you'll get money. And as I explained earlier, there is no money. It's false, empty promises.
Well, I have no doubt there's going to be some money, but I'm afraid it's going to be for the group that took this initiative on their own.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it'll probably go into their pockets.
Well, what they're looking at, they're promising communities money. So they come up to Papakolea and they say, and what really offends me as a taxpayer is they refer to this as free money, pork barrel. In our today's economy, when education needs the money, when healthcare needs the money, when housing needs the money, they're talking about a pork barrel program.
Where does free money come from?
Exactly. It comes from us as taxpayers. So
Well, or from whoever we borrow it
or
from.
whoever we borrow it. But
Yeah.
in my mind, when I get a check every 2 weeks, they're taking out taxes at the end of the year. They're taking out taxes. Every time I go somewhere, I'm getting taxed. So I'm saying, if you're going to tax me, put my money to real benefits of our community. Put it in these schools. Don't put it in a wayfinding sign that's going to attract more traffic that may be a detriment to our babies who are coming to and from school.
Well, in North America, you know, there was quite an issue about taxation without representation. Sounds to me like that's another example.
Well,
And that's not even the most outrageous. It's just the fact that someone can come in and say, this is what's happening here, and have it go all the way through Congress and up to the Department of the Interior. You know, it reminds me of a zoo, and I guess these new zookeepers will do what they can to make their wealth out of it. You know?
One farmer in another national heritage area was stated of saying, and actually went down and got a permit to build on his own private property, and they wouldn't issue him a permit.
We rejected his application.
They rejected his application because they said, well, we don't know what's happening to the conformity of the management plan through the national heritage area. Now, again, it's unelected, you know, unaccountable body that's making these decisions where people maybe need to do certain things to their homes. Maybe like for me, okay, because I live in a home that has, it's upstairs. You have to go up, you know, at least 15 flights of stairs. And if you can look at majority of our homes in this area, you have to walk upstairs to get to.
Well,
so what if
we're talking about hillside construction.
And so let's say that one day I have to change and modify the outside of my home to accommodate, because I pray someday I'm not wheelchair bound, but if that may happen, or I have a hard time walking upstairs. They can actually say or stop my permit to do building on the outside because they want this area to be conformed to a certain look. Now, I'm wondering, wait a minute, is that meeting the needs of the residents of someone who's a private, like I don't own the land, I'm a leasee, but the structure belongs to me. I pay a mortgage on it, and it's a pretty hefty mortgage. And so I'm wondering, I want to grow old in my home, but because they put this boundary that says I'm within it, and they start this management plan, how and I need to conform my house to how I age, what if their management plan says I can't?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I raised my family here, and I would like to end my life here. And I am bothered that this group has been formed, and get this one. So it's supposed to be, the management plan is supposed to be after 15 years self-sustaining. Who's going to pay for that? Who's going to pay for it to be self-sustaining after 15 years? We, within this boundary, are going to be forced to pay for that, and it's nothing that we even were a part of in the beginning. We've worked really hard to dialogue of where the community self-determined would like to go. And for now to have this managing entity who's actually hired consultants who are affiliated with our community to come in and try to sell it by promising money to the community and promising things they really cannot keep. They are not in Washington, D.C. They do not have a vote on the floor. They are not the Secretary of Interior. I'm struggling with how do you keep a promise of millions of dollars when Obama's cutting a $15 to $18 million program for the entire United States by 50%. So, you know, I think that what was discussed on the floor, that national heritage areas, new national heritage areas, get somewhere between $350,000 and $150,000 in total to operate. How can you, with that being the facts, and then Congress actually, you know, in their, you know, they have a book that they recommended making cuts, eliminate the program. How can you come into our community and say, we're going to promise you millions of dollars? You know, unless there's something else going on.
Oh,
there's definitely something else going on.
There's something else going on. They've got an agenda, and it doesn't include us or anybody who lives here. You know, it's another developer's dream opportunity.
That's what they even said in 2009 on the congressional floor. They said when we put a boundary, it becomes national parks jurisdiction. And they had a discussion about Arizona because of jurisdiction issues between Homeland Security, Forestry, National Parks and Service. They said once this designation goes around, you're going to have jurisdiction issues. So, you know, obviously there's a jurisdiction issue that needs to be worked out with Department of Homelands, but guess what? They never went to Department of Homelands because they have alternative motives. I don't know what they are, and they are there because I don't see why they did this for 6 years and never came knocking on anybody's door.
They don't want your input.
They don't. Exactly. No, and I just say that because I'm just dismayed that...
It's almost unbelievable.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Exactly. And it's just not about Papakole in this area. It's about Tantalus, who's asked to be withdrawn. It's about Chinatown property owners who've been asked to withdraw. Liliha Neighborhood Board voted against it. Here we are, community saying, look, you're saying it's an option to be in it, but then you're not letting us withdraw. You're not changing the map to reflect what we're asking. So really, you're right.
Well, I'll tell you, everybody who's out there watching this and listening to it, if you don't happen to live within this Honolulu Ahupua'a, I'm not sure that's the right terminology, but according to this plan, if you don't happen to live here, just hide and wait a little while, and you may see the same thing happening in your community without your input. Yeah. Don't think that because you're sitting on Kauai or Hawaii Island and thinking, yeah, that's a real shame. Just keep in mind this could be happening in your community. It's another way to take. You know, it hasn't been successful through any other means, so this is another avenue. You know, this is winding us up. I'm sure we could go on for quite a while on this, but I think you get the basic message of the frustration of a community who is having things happen to it in process without actually having any say. So keep your eyes and ears open, folks. This could be coming your way. Tamar, would like to thank you very much for being with us. And I'd like to say thank you to those who are watching. Once again, Kaiopua Fife with the Kiwani Foundation. And this is Voices of Truth, one-on-one with Hawaii's Future, talking to you. And we are a component of Free Hawaii Broadcasting System. Mahalo nui and ahui oho.
Mahalo for watching Voices of Truth one-on-one with Hawaii's Future. Watch us on the web 24/7 at voicesoftruthtv.com. You'll find all our shows, including this one, in case you want to see it again or share it with family and friends. Also view our weekly video commentaries at freehawaiitv.com. And check out our blog, published daily, at freehawaii.info. It's all part of the Free Hawaii Broadcasting Network.